you submit, in a marriage. But to what? Well, both of you, if you have any sense, submit to the absolute necessity of maintaining a positive relationship over the longest possible term in the most diverse possible situations, right? Because you're going to experience great joy together and also great catastrophe. And you're in it for the long run, in principle. And so both of you have to submit yourself to the necessity of acting toward one another in a manner that makes that long-term iterated play most productive. And there's a submission in that. That's the submission of maturity. That's the adoption of voluntary responsibility. That's putting away childish things.
Peterson then claims that the idea of marital submission being unidirectional, that is, wives having to obey their husbands, but husbands not having to obey their wives, has never been conceptualized that way in classic thought, not by people who thought deeply about such things. What is that spirit? Who defines what is redemptive and dynamic? What happens when there is a conflict between the husband and wife who makes the decision then? Many call marriage a form of voluntary enslavement, Peterson says, but really, it's an adoption of responsibility. The responsibility, he argues, is to help each other solve each other's hardest problems, which is only possible, he says, within that boundary of permanence, with the knowledge that your vows truly do hold their meaning.
For better or for worse, right? That's the ethos of marriage. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that you and your wife or your husband will face the ultimate catastrophes of life together. And that if you do that properly, you'll face them together voluntarily. And if you do that in the right spirit, then you'll face the ultimate catastrophes of life voluntarily. Each of you should jointly submit to the spirit that makes your relationship redemptive and dynamic. And that's a much better way of thinking about it. So there's an element of submission in some sense that's involved, but it's not unidirectional, and it's never been conceptualized that way in classic thought, not by people who thought deeply about such things. And you submit, in a marriage. But to what? Well, both of you, if you have any sense, submit to the absolute necessity of maintaining a positive relationship over the longest possible term in the most diverse possible situations, right? Because you're going to experience great joy together and also great catastrophe.
Peterson's vision of marriage is a dynamic one. Properly understood, it's a lifelong wrestling between two worthy adversaries who strengthen each other and help one another to sort out and improve upon their various personal struggles and weaknesses. According to Peterson, both husbands and wives must mutually submit to the spirit that makes relationship redemptive and dynamic. Why is the idea of submission of a woman to a man, in the context of marriage, socially repulsive? It's an excellent and important question. Peterson, assuming the role of theologian and expert on Catholicism, replied,
Christian sacralization of marriage is predicated on the idea that the proper union of a man and woman, offers the opportunity for the emergence of something like the spirit of the Logos. And so that's the Word made flesh. And so what that means is that a dynamic can be set up between the participants in the relationship. And that dynamic is something like the truthful exchange of redemptive information aimed at maximizing the quality of the relationship, right? So that would mean that if you're a wife, you're subordinate to the aim of maximizing the relationship, abetted by the willingness to exchange truthful information. And so then there's an emergent spirit that characterizes the interaction of the two people in the marriage, and that is symbolically represented by the Logos. And it's partly because you have hard problems to solve. And if the person that you're with isn't willing to put forward their opinion, then you only have half the cognitive power that you would otherwise have. Now, hopefully you find someone who's interestingly different from you, like not so different that you can't communicate, and you have to be careful of that, but interestingly different, and then hopefully they have the ability and the will to express their opinion, and then your interest stays heightened, and there has to be that tension in a relationship. You know, people think, well, I want to get along perfectly with my partner. It's like, no, you probably don't. You just get bored, and then you go looking for trouble. And so you want a little bit of trouble in the relationship, and a little bit of mystery, and a little bit of combativeness, and the ability to exchange opinions forthrightly. And
Peterson emphasizes the idea that when we don't take our marriage vows seriously, we cripple our ability to be open with one another, because we fear that being truthful to ourselves with our spouse will give them license to leave us. In a world where the majority of divorces are filed unilaterally, his point is well taken. According to Jordan, successful relationships are all about creating a space where the boundaries are clearly defined, and each partner can trust the other to be completely open about their thoughts, feelings, and experiences.
What do you do when you get married? That's easy. You take someone who's just as useless and horrible as you are, and then you shackle yourself to them. And then you say, we're not running away, no matter what happens. Yeah, well, that's perfect, because then you don't get to run away. And the thing is like, if you can run away, you can't tell each other the truth. Because if you tell someone the truth about you and they don't run away, they weren't listening. And so if you don't have someone around that can't run away, then you can't tell them the truth. And so that's part of the purpose of the marriage. It's like, okay, I'll bet on you, you bet on me. It's a losing bet, we both know that, but given our current circumstances, we're unlikely to find anyone better, that's for sure. If you don't want to be bitter about the intimate element of your relationship, how much time do you have to spend together each week? And my rule of thumb, sort of derived from clinical observations, is that you need to spend 90 minutes a week with your partner talking. And that means you're telling each other about your life and staying in touch, you know, so that you each know what the other is up to. And you're discussing what needs to be done to keep the household running smoothly. And you're laying out some mutually acceptable vision of how the next week or the next months are going to go together, right? So that keeps your narratives locked together like the strands in a rope. You need that for 90 minutes or you drift apart. And you need to spend intimate time together at least once a week, and probably more like twice. And that has to be negotiated. And if you don't negotiate it, and if you don't make it a priority, then it won't happen.
John Calvin wrote, "Submit yourselves. God has bound us so strongly to each other that no man ought to endeavor to avoid subjection, and where love reigns, mutual services will be rendered." You'll have someone to share all the positive things of life with. Human beings are complicated and have such dark corners and unresolved problems in their life. Sometimes those stem back generations and are twisted and bent in all sorts of ways. It's very difficult to reveal yourself, except to someone who can't run away. If you found this video informative, be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for more timely updates. Hope to see you again soon.